Hello and welcome to the Exceptional Advice Show. So Tristin, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to go over one of the points that we mentioned in our intro video to client engagement not so long ago. And today we're going to be talking about price pressure.
Okay, probably one of my favorite topics. Why? Because it's maybe one of the least favorite concepts for most advisors, when they're experiencing it in reality, that is. So for everyone who's watching this, please make sure, or at least it's our suggestion, that you go back and watch that intro video to client engagement, the 4 key components of client engagement. We do go into like an overview of how all of the different pieces fit together, as well as some definitions around things. But even though we've kind of done a bit of a definition, I think we'll delve a little bit more into price pressure today and what it is and how to recognize it and where it comes from and perhaps the psychology of it as well. So what is price pressure then?
What is price pressure? Price pressure is just sort of like the tension or the real consideration of whatever price you're putting forward. So whether it comes up as, oh, that's a little expensive, or are you sure it's worth that? It's kind of those sort of things that pop up when you're talking about price.
Yeah, so there's some I guess tension is another word we can use for pressure. And it's interesting because a lot of people think of this as just purely being in the mind of the person paying the fee. In other words, it's the pressure on the client.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's a two-way thing, right? It's the interaction between the advisor and the client. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. So the other video or the other podcast that I suggest that you check out, depending on where you're tuning into this, would be the video that we did on price discovery, or the podcast, whichever. I think that's very, very relevant, and you should be checking that out because it'll help provide a lot more context to what we're talking about, especially in this part of client engagement around price pressure. And so in that video, we talk about the interaction between, the advisor and clients in kind of a demographic personality profile spread following a normal distribution curve. And in other words, some people are more sensitive to price than others. But one of the things we also talk about in that is the better you are at articulating your value, the more the bell curve moves to the right. In other words, the less tension or the less pressure that your clients will experience for the same level of fee, relative to their circumstance. So it's kind of interesting that as we work with advisors and we go through and help them to own their value, it's kind of interesting because I've had some good conversations with clients over this week in particular. And sometimes it's a challenging process we go through, advisors thinking that we're there to help teach them how to structure their client engagement. And in reality, we're not there to teach them how to do what they already actually know how to do, but aren't necessarily doing. It's more about creating a challenge for them and pushing them past their own internal boundaries, right? So what's expensive, what value is, and all of the little, belief patterns that we have going on. So, the reason that we're able to help people make those breakthroughs isn't because we say, hey, this is what you should be charging for this and here's how to say it. That's the smallest component. It's more about understanding what's in your head. So this is a really important concept as I kind of bring it all back to what we were talking about. So price pressure is really the interaction between the advisor and client and their perception of value and the price. So making sure the price is high enough that the client actually feels some serious tension in the payment of the fee. And it's kind of interesting because what are most advisors doing when they're engaging a client? Are they trying to create tension?
No, the opposite.
They're trying to avoid tension. So, if it's a financial advisor, it might be trying to obfuscate it by saying, well, we're going to save you at least this much money in fees versus different structures, or we're going to save you this much in tax or whatever. And instead of actually focusing on, well, what's the value of the advice and what's the change that it's creating in your life circumstance in order, to get closer to where you want to be. So that's really price pressure. So why does it need to be there, Tristin? What happens if you have it and what happens if you don't?
Well, I mean, we talked about it a little in the intro episode, but price pressure kind of relates to everything else. All these things are kind of intertwined, and they all benefit from one being done well. Kind of benefits the other a little bit, and then it kind of goes round and round.
So what do you mean by that?
So for example, right? So you've got great price pressure with a client. You're kind of hitting that sweet spot of, look, it's a lot of money, but we think it's worth it because of what we're doing together, right? You're at that sweet spot. As a result, your client will be more likely to refer. They're going to take whatever it is you're doing together much more seriously because they value it a little more. And that kind of comes back to the car example we talked about. So if your car's just had a wiper fluid malfunction and doesn't work anymore, I'm not really a car guy. And you're going to drop $500 on a little runaround car while you source a new one, right? It's not going to hold the same amount of value as if you're buying call it a brand new Audi for 70, however much Audis are. There's kind of this disparity there, but just because you paid more for something, it's not the only reason you value it more, but it sort of as a result of paying more, there's like a certain amount.
Yeah, so maybe if I could help you with the analogy, it could be the difference of if you buy so let's say you're buying an Audi, but you buy one that's like 20 years old, and
sure.
it's been in an accident before, and you don't pay that much for it. And so if you're down the shopping center and someone scrapes it, you don't really care. Versus you bought the brand new one. Then obviously you're going to value, or your perception of the value will generally be high. Now we're making generalizations here.
Yeah.
So for those of you who would prefer the cheaper version, that doesn't change the fact that there is, in a lot of different things, a different price tension and a different value perception, just because you don't necessarily put it in cars. And I say that because, I've progressed from being the guy that has the brand new sports car to being the guy that has the little old car that no one takes any notice of, and is happy with that. So the point of all of this is that price does play a part in your value perception of things. Things that you would have already valued potentially you're going to value a lot more when you've had to really make a choice to spend some dollars on them. And let's face it, if you're a good advisor, that's one thing. But if you're an exceptional advisor, and that's what this show is about, then you're really aimed at you're helping them change their life. Not just make a few decisions here or there or structure things or whatever, but actually to be more accountable to themselves and to make better choices in order to get what they want out of life. I mean, that's kind of how I would describe it. Well, if you're doing that, how could you be doing that if there isn't a two-way reward mechanism? So a lot of what we talk about in client engagement is about creating this balance between things, right? The balance in the relationship that you have with a client. So if you're and this is important to understand, if you're on the pathway of becoming an exceptional advisor, then you have to get more back for more impact that you're creating, or otherwise you're generating an imbalance in things. And that's also one of the reasons why the better an advisor gets at articulating their value, the more clients are happy to pay, right? So the ratios change. The bell curve moves to the right. In other words, those people that might have said, well, that's too expensive, I'm out, are now going to say, well, that's really expensive, but I'm in. So what's the key difference there? The key difference is your belief, right? What you believe value is. And what you as an advisor believe value is going to determine how much value you can actually create for a client. So how does this psychology fit into things? So we've got a client that we've started working with not so long ago. So this is one of yours, Tristin. And you can correct me because you were telling me the story, right? Yeah. So I said to you, "Hey, I don't even know what a $10,000 client looks like, right? What are they? How would I find them?" So Baz talking about we should be getting our average client revenue up or whatever, and he's like, "Well, I don't even know what they look like," and yet when you were going through the analysis of his client book, was there $10,000 clients in there?
Yeah.
I was like, there's one.
Yeah, there's one.
There's one. So what was the difference between those two things? It's a perception thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So, if I were in his shoes, would I have any compunction or challenge in saying to that client, "Hey, look, here's what we're doing for you, and this is what the fee needs to be"? Well, no. But did he have a challenge with that?
Yeah.
So what's the difference? Is the difference the client?
I mean, they may be different, but
Well, I mean, if I'm having the conversation with the client, or he would be having the conversation with the client.
Oh, right. It's just kind of where your bell curves are sitting, right?
So, well, the point that I was making, though, is the client's the same, right?
Yeah, the client. If it's the same client, yeah.
Yeah, like literally the same client. So what is the difference? The difference is just perception of value. And it's a really interesting thing, because if you want to be an exceptional advisor, the only way you can do that is if you develop your perception of value, right? So, as I was saying, as we kind of coach advisors, we often go through this. And I'm saying this to you not to kind of paint a picture of, we're trying to be your coaches. That's not the reason we're doing this. We're just advisors, right? So we just happen to be advisors to other advisors. But it doesn't change the dynamics of the things that we're talking about, right? So often as we're going through and doing this, we'll have a tension period, especially at the start, where the advisor's focused on the mechanics of what we're doing, right? Well, what do you mean? I already know what I'm doing. I already know how to do this. Instead of understanding that, well, actually what we're trying to do is annoy you a little bit around this, because our job isn't to give you a process. It's to help you to own your own value. It's to help you make foundational change. And so they're two very different approaches. And to me, that's also one of the things that's different between, good advice and great advice and exceptional advice, is you move from being focused on a technical outcome to being focused on a life behavioral outcome. And, we get this a lot from advisors saying, well, I'm not a life coach, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. Well, okay. Neither am I. Do I have life coaching qualifications? Have I changed the lives of thousands of people over the last 27 years? Well, yeah, I have. Am I perfect at it? No. I mean, I'm on a journey to exceptional advice just like everyone else. So I guess what I'm like, if I bring all of my interesting stories back to a point, your price pressure or your price tension is largely going to be determined by how you are perceiving things internally and what you think about. It's always up to the advisor to set the bar first. Secondly, yes, every client will interact differently. That's why we have a bell curve, right? But what we know is that all things being equal, most of the clients will respond with a yes within a reasonably tight band of that, bell curve. Maybe instead of me drawing it out with my fingers, we should have brought it up on the screen. But refer back to that one on the if you're tuning in via podcast, then you might just want to watch the price discovery one on YouTube. Go check that out, because we do bring up slides and stuff using the bell curve analogy, but I think most of you get what we're talking about. So in other words, price pressure it takes both parties to tango, right? And what's in your head is largely going to determine the level at which your clients experience price pressure, right? How they experience value. So many times we've had advisors say, my clients won't pay that. Well, if you think that, then what's the case? No, they're not going to pay that. If you know that it's worth it, and I'm not saying you just put your price up, until you've taken everyone, like someone like, what's the price? Well, 100% of your wealth, right? I'm not suggesting you do that. And in fact, I think that would be a ridiculous assumption. I'm assuming all of you are in a position of getting the balance right. You know what the value is. I'm trusting you to make a judgment call with your client to know that the client is going to be exponentially better off because of it, including the quantum of what you're charging them. But that has to be set at the right level, because most advisors we encounter are not owning their value, right? They're doing the opposite. They think they are. They're justifying it in a lot of different ways, but they're not owning their value. And that's kind of the critical step. So what happens when you get good price tension with clients? How do you know when you've got like price tension, right, versus something else, right? So sometimes you might have a client go, oh, we're not engaging with you because it's too expensive, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean it was price that there was a problem?
Not necessarily.
So what could the issue have actually been?
Well, I mean, you kind of said it before, right? So as your value explanation and your articulation of it get better, your bell curve kind of moves and your prices shift with it as well. So it could just be that, your explanation on that day, maybe you were trying it differently and it just didn't go well. You forgot a couple things, explanation didn't go well, and as a result, the client didn't really see the same amount of value. So for that, what the client is thinking that they're going to get out of the relationship, it's too expensive for them.
Yeah, so you could have failed to articulate value. Maybe you were having an off day and you didn't, connect the dots or the nuances. Geez, I mean, I can't tell you how many clients I've engaged over the last 27 years. But do I still get it right every time? No. And honestly, if I were, then the fun would run out for me, right? So why would I be doing a show about exceptional advice if I'd reached, the ultimate perfection of that? I mean, it's not even possible, but I wouldn't be doing the show, right? I'm doing the show not to build a brand or convince you guys to come on board as clients or any of those things. I'm doing it because I want to be a better advisor myself. I want to share what I've learned, and just even the act of us, talking about it together gives more clarity, helps me own and understand, my value better. So price tension may not be price tension. So another example of that is, so it could just be you didn't articulate your value well enough, so the price was too expensive for their perception of value. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or it could have been that it's a completely different issue. So you might be out of emotional contextual alignment. So in other words, your advice to them or something you've said to them could be creating a tension that is there's an emotional conflict to what you're saying to them. Right? This happens quite often. And it's not always easy to get to the bottom of it, but that'll be a topic of a whole other series of shows. So what else could it be? Well, it could be that, I don't know, maybe you've given them advice about restructuring their property portfolio, and unbeknownst to you, two of the properties were an inheritance from dad, and dad said, bricks and mortar never sell, right? He just said it over and over. And so there could be an internal subconscious thing where it's like, if I sell the property, then I'm a bad son, right? Or bad daughter or whatever. So you've given the advice, and so even though everything else in the story and the value is there for them, but they've got this internal emotional conflict. So what are they going to potentially say to you about, your engagement? It's too expensive. So did I explain that okay?
Yeah. Like it's easier not to address the emotional issue and just say, oh, it's too expensive. Sorry.
Well, the interesting thing is that most of the time there's an emotional context roadblock. The client isn't consciously aware of it, right? And so an advisor's job is to help them to find that emotionally contextual roadblock and to push past that. And look, as I said, we'll do a whole lot of episodes on that. And no matter how many times I do it, there's always situations where it can be tricky trying to get to these things. And I think that's the difference between, again, good advice and exceptional advice. It's where you really start to create, value, where the price and the dollars and the perception go up, exponentially as well. So coming back to it, and again, we talked about this in the price discovery. You really only know you're getting price tension by actually increasing the price, right?
Yeah.
And you only know when you're reaching the right levels for you, right, by having what happen. What has to happen for you to know that you're getting the feedback from, the marketplace or your prospective clients or your existing clients for that matter?
Yeah, well, I mean, you need the feedback from clients, right? So you need to figure out when you're charging someone and they go, "Ooh, that's a bit expensive. I don't think so." Or someone goes, "Yeah, no worries, easy."
Okay.
You've got the two
Yeah,
extremes.
yeah. So in other words, you need some people to say yes and you need some people to say no. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've said those exact words to other advisors. You need some people to say yes and you need some people to say no in order to get that price tension. Now, just for clarity, and this is something that's come up quite a few times. Oh, Bazzy, it's all right for you. You advise other professionals or other advisors. It's different for our clients. Well, yeah, I'm advising other advisors mostly now, right? But I've been doing this for, as I said, coming up to 27 years. And for most of that time, that's not been the case. And not only that, most of my time is spent advising other advisors around specific clients. And a lot of the time where we've got some serious complexity around business structures or whatever, I'm actually sit in on that process and, be one of the advisors' expert panel. And just because I like business, I always make sure that I keep my eye in. So I will always have a number of non-advisory, advice clients at any point in time as well, right? That's just what I do. It's not, it's more like 20% of the time that I spend or the work that I do. This issue, and I want you to understand this, we're telling you these things, but it's not just about your business. It's about your clients' businesses. So if you want to be in a position to be a better advisor for your clients, then take on board the things that we're telling you. I'm trying to teach you not teach you, but to share what we've learned about creating exceptional advice and making life change to people. So an analogy or an example of that is a business, and I've talked about them in a few episodes just because I really like them. And it's a manufacturing firm. They produce some parts for building materials. I won't kind of get more specific than that. And they're really top end. And it's pretty good family business, and there's some internal benefits, and they pay themselves and all the rest of it. But after those things, their margins on products are only around 4 point something %. So over the last 9 months, but really just the last 6 months, we've got them to change their pricing, because what they didn't understand was the value they were bringing to the table. Like these guys are the best at the best, not just at the materials that they're producing and providing, but in their understanding of how to install them and put them into buildings. And so within that period of time, their margins have gone from I can't remember what it was, 4 or something like that. There was actually 2 business units, and it was different between the two. To more like 15 to 17%. So what kind of difference does that make in the business? Now, question for you, so you can answer on the audience's behalf, Tristin. How many of their clients, customers, whichever word you'd like to use for that, how many of them do you think said no because they've increased their price?
Oh, very few.
It's a real easy number. It's a very round number.
A round number. 3?
No, that's not round. I mean, literally.
A 2 in cursive?
I mean, you're just being a smart ass now. No, 0, right? So it's kind of interesting. So how do they go from, I don't know, being let's call it a $10 million business, 4% margin, after they're paying themselves, family business. So yeah, that's okay. But what's the difference to their family between getting a 4% margin and say a 17% margin? Right, we're now talking 400,000 to 1.7 million. In fact, we're having the conversation. He's like, "There's all this money in the bank account. There's all this money. It can't be this easy." And my point out of that is, what their real issue is they didn't have price tension. Right? They hadn't gone through the process of price discovery, which is the process. And as I said, if you haven't checked out that episode, make sure that you do. So they hadn't gone through that process, and because of that, they didn't have appropriate price tension in their engagements. And the only way for you to actually know where you're at on that process of price discovery is to have some people say yes and some people say no. And so if everyone says yes, you've got a lot of information, haven't you?
Yeah.
What is that information telling you?
Everyone's happy to pay that.
And what would that translate to getting the optimal balance in a business? It says you're too cheap, right? So remember, you cannot get to price discovery without some people saying yes and some people saying no. So if everyone said yes, then where are you on that bell curve, right? You're right down the bottom, because statistically you haven't even got any evidence that you've moved up to the bell curve point where you're reaching a point where some people are going to say no. Okay, so this is an ultra high-end, business in what they're doing. So what happens if we get to that level being 25% margin? Do you think that at that margin we might start to get more people say no?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I suspect so, right? Can you afford to have some of those people say no when your margin's gone from 17 to 25%?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, not only that, the people that you're working with going to be better engagements by and large.
Yeah.
They're going to value what you're doing more. Yeah, and that's why price tension is so important. It's not the only reason, and you kind of touched on it before, how they all interconnect together. So, firstly, remember that your perception of your value is the biggest input to how your clients are going to perceive what your value is. It's your belief, right? It's your frame of reference about what your value is that will have the biggest impact, more than anything else. More than the technical qualifications, more than the monetary change that you're creating for the client, more than, any other factor. It's what's in your head. If you don't believe it's worth it, if you don't believe a client should pay that, then guess what? You're not going to put the price to them, and they're certainly not going to say yes. And even if you do put the price to them, then is there a much higher chance of them saying no? Because in other words, if you're doing it that way, your bell curve has moved to the left. So everyone is more price sensitive if that's your frame of reference. So a very important concept for you guys to understand. Even if you've been through this iteration like hundreds of times like I have, the fee that I would charge for something today is obviously significantly different to a fee that I would have charged when I started out at 22. So, you get the idea, right? Very, very important. So what's in your head? then how you articulate your value. So how good you are at getting the nuance, right, of saying to the client, this is where you are, this is where you want to be, in their language, in their emotional language. This is how we're going to help you get there. Can you do that on your own? Do you need help? I can help you. Okay? So I'm giving an overview. So how well you do this will also move the curve to the right. Okay? So it starts with your belief, your perception. How well you do that moves the curve to the right. And then, of course, now it's up to the clients to give you the input as to where your bell curve is at the moment. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So what else do we need to cover on price tension?
That's kind of it. Unless you want to go deeper into something we've already talked about.
Look, I think that's a reasonable overview of price tension. I guess I kind of want to just reiterate some points here because they are so important. And that is that if you're not sure, if you're in a position of going, my clients won't pay that, or I don't think it's worth it, or how do I justify it? These are probably issues that have stemmed from, the environment around you, right? The program that you've adopted and accepted. How do you know that? Like, really, how do you know that? How do you know if you're being objective about how you're looking at what you're doing? How do you know that that would be expensive for that kind of client? Have you gone and sought external input? Who are you comparing that to? Right? What are you comparing it to in the market? And not only that, are you trying to price at your competitor's price? Is that what you're actually trying to do? Or are you trying to be, I'm assuming you're watching the show because you want to be an exceptional advisor. You just don't want to be a good advisor that is priced around the average, right? You want to be an exceptional advisor. So if you're an exceptional advisor, why would you, using the construction business, why would you be getting 4.5% margin when in really the space of 3 months you could be getting 15, 17, right? And no one says no. So in that particular scenario, what's the obstacle between those two things? It's just what's in your head, right? So understand that. Remember that price tension isn't just for the client. Price tension is for you. How much tension have you got in the pricing that you're setting your clients? So you're not just looking every year to challenge your client base on price tension. You're looking to challenge yourself. Otherwise, how is your value growing, right? The market will tell you whether you're actually delivering value in line with what you're getting from an engagement point of view. So it's not possible to oversell people on this value concept, right, and rip them off, right? Well, I guess it is, but only for a short period of time. And no, I don't think anyone who is interested in doing that would be watching the Exceptional Advice show. So I know that's not you. But there's no way that would happen because price discovery means that you're getting the feedback from the clients, right? If all of your clients start leaving after they've said yes, well, maybe you're not delivering the value. But look, I've never experienced that. I've never seen that. I've never seen that happen. So understanding your input and your psychology is the most important, the most important part. How you translate your value and how well you're doing that from an interpersonal point of view, and really doing it from, their individual value perception is important as well. And just remember, if people don't value what you do, there are consequences. And I think that's the bit we should maybe just go over again.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't charge enough and there's not price tension, your clients won't value what you're doing as much. So will they take you as seriously?
No.
Will they get back to you as quickly?
No.
Will they refer other people to you?
Maybe, but the quality of the referrals would be very different.
And certainly the quantum will be different as well. Yeah. So we know, it's one of the things that we measure as we go through and do this. The more price tension that you're creating in your business, the higher your referral rate and the better the quality of clients that are coming through. kind of makes sense. But the reason it makes sense is because you were owning your value in the first place, right? So the more you're owning your value, the more you're, if you will, it can be esoteric, sending a message to the universe that you're worth it, and the more it responds, right? So we went a little hippie there for a bit. It's maybe the conversation we had yesterday about with some clients about Nimbin, right? Nimbin, the weed capital. So yeah, we've got a client moving to I think it's Mullumbimby. So we were just giving him a hard time about because I think it's like 50 kilometers or something from Nimbin. So price tension's important, your value's important, and translating this to clients important to every metric in your business, not just your margins and your profitability. And that is a big thing. If you are not profitable enough, you can't be in a position where you're free to create more exceptional change for your clients. So thanks everyone. If you've got any questions or thoughts, please make sure that you let us know in the comments. You can feel free to, if you've got questions, do this thing where it's pretty magic. You shoot me a message on LinkedIn and I will answer that question. Otherwise, would really appreciate your support, liking and subscribing and sharing the content. We are doing that. We're not asking for anything. We're not taking sponsors. We're not looking for stuff. We're not monetizing it. None of that's why we're doing this. The reason we're doing it is because we want to share our thoughts and together become exceptional advisors. So love to know what you think. Love to hear from you as well. Take care, everyone.